Welcome back. Well, we've come to the end of Vegetables Loves Flowers, the book study. This is chapter 9, our last chapter. So I'm so glad that you've decided to meet me here, and we're outside again this morning. Lots of birds chirping, and city life is just going on all around us, but it's just such a pretty day. We wanted to be outside. So chapter 9 is the yard around the garden. And y'all, this is really all about the secret society, nature as it was meant to be. So I do want to read to you from the very first paragraph in the chapter that's opening the chapter. Habitat is all about building community. Restoring a portion of the landscape beyond the vegetable and flower garden will go a long way in establishing a strong community of beneficial creatures. As the ecosystem came to life in my garden, I began to wonder where these bugs and creatures went to spend the winter, or where they went to nest and have babies. I started looking at the yard that surrounded the working garden with new eyes, and set out to make it more hospitable to all the good things I worked so hard to attract to the garden. And I think once you start thinking about that, once you start recognizing these good creatures that are really the pest control of our garden, the pollination of our garden, and also a little entertainment, right, in our garden. I mean, the birds are just, right now we're, I think today's May 30th, so we're at the end of May. Baby bird season is in full swing, so that means the adults are busy. When I walk Barry around the perimeter of our farm, I see so much action, and I will tell you, that's this perimeter walking, which we do 3 to 4 times a day. I started it because Barry has arthritis, to have a regular routine of exercise at a slow pace. But I also do it because, we fight deer here. We had 3 last night right outside of our fence, and our fence is not tall enough to keep deer out. But I encourage her to powder her nose as we're walking this perimeter. Marking her territory is basically what that's doing. And that's just another little piece of the pie for varmints, right? So this landscape beyond our garden is really the home to all these creatures. So some of the things that, before I dive into what the chapter actually says, things that cross my mind, I mean, you can probably hear that the trash truck is going down the road now. So we have a lot of city happenings going on around here. And I still have neighbors that have the little truck that come and spray their yards with, in my opinion, really bad stuff that really damages and is a threat to these creatures that we're trying to encourage. So my thought is, now I want to do everything I can to keep as many of these creatures from leaving my yard, right? From leaving my habitat. And so I try to consider all of the needs of these animals and insects, water, habitat. So I've written some notes here as usual, and so I'm just going to kind of hit on some of these. So something I really want to hit home in this chapter is what is so special or important about native plants. And I don't know if you're like me, but I thought native plants, native means that they naturally occur and grow in your area. Now there are also alien plants, we call them aliens, plants that have been introduced that are not native. But native are those plants that naturally occur in your area, and it's different for different regions, right? So what is so significant about native plants? Well, not only are those plants used to your conditions, so that makes them kind of easier to grow. They don't face as many challenges. You know, for me, they can take drought, or they can take the weather that kind of comes along in my area. But there is something so much more important than that I did not get or understand. Native plants support the bottom and the beginning of the food chain, and that is native insects. Native insects are who native birds eat. And that whole chain, which I won't go into that, there's a lot of great information out there about that. But when you plant non-native plants, and I think I may have mentioned in this book study, for instance, where I am here in southeastern Virginia, the crepe myrtle, which is a beautiful tree, but it is not native. It does not support any native wildlife other than perhaps a branch for a bird to perch on, but it doesn't provide any food source for native creatures. And, you know, so I'm not a purist by any stretch of the imagination, meaning I'm not thinking that we should all rip out all of our non-native plants and replace them. But I am thinking native when I go to replace plants or add to my landscape, because I grow a lot of non-natives in my cut flower garden. But I also do grow some natives in my cut flower garden. So the surrounding yard is where you really put those non-natives to work. You know, for instance, one oak tree supports hundreds of different types of native insects, you know, and that is just so awesome. So our native birds that eat those insects are attracted to that tree. So do you see what I mean? It's like a food chain. And when a link in that chain is missing, broken, or gone, those native birds might not be attracted to your landscape. So there's a reason that it comes really clear to me now why we're losing some of those native birds in our area, because people are putting more and more non-natives. And the other problem is those non-native plants attract non-native insects, which are those insects like Japanese beetles and other insects that are not native, so they don't have natural predators. Our native insects have natural predators. So do you see I just want to kind of paint the big picture of that for you. So that's why native plants are so very, very important. So I just want you to put in your little pipe to smoke from this day forward. When it comes time to adding to your landscape or you're ripping out overgrown stuff, find out what the native plants are. And you really have to do the research, because typically, unless you have a nursery that specializes in native plants, your local nursery doesn't always have a big selection of those. So you kind of have to do your homework, and there's lots of great native plant societies and master gardeners that might be master naturalists we have in our area. I don't know if you do. They'd be a great place to start too. So what are the essentials of life for these creatures that we don't want to leave our yard? Because when they leave your yard, they're at risk. They're at risk for pesticides and other exposures and other predators, dogs and those kinds of things. So and cats. So these are the things you need to provide in your your garden, and it's the essentials of life. The same for us. Habitat. You know, we want to provide for the native bees, the birds, the insects, and we'll talk a little bit more about habitat in just a minute. Water is huge. If you don't do anything else, providing a constant source of water in your garden. You know, that's the way that I charmed the eastern bluebirds for years. My neighbors down at the river's about 2,000 feet from us, and I would go to one of my friends' house down there, and they just had hordes of eastern bluebirds, and they are the coolest birds and so beautiful. Well, I wanted them. Well, we had the open space that they like, you know, to have in front of their houses. So we put up bluebird houses for years, eastern bluebird houses. No takers. But then I introduced bird baths. And what I soon learned is fall through winter, they were really looking for a place to bathe. For 3 years, they came and bathed and drank at our house, but they didn't live at our house. So then suddenly one spring, they decided that our place was good enough to live. So water will attract birds to your garden that you perhaps have never seen at a bird feeder. So it's really a great way, free. There's a lot of things you can use at home. I mean, I show an upside down trash can lid. It's just something that has shallow water that's easy for you to dump and change out every day because you don't want to grow mosquitoes. So water is essential, it is free, it is really easy, and I will tell you, there's more entertainment at a bird bath than there is anywhere else in a garden, so it's really, really a lot of fun. So the food sources, certainly feeders attract a lot of birds, but providing these native plants that provide natural food, you won't necessarily see the birds as much as you would at a feeder. Feeders, in my opinion, provide for birds during tough times, and it also plays a big, important role of bringing the birds closer to where you can see them, like right outside your window where you can sit and watch the birds. And I do recommend that you go to a wild bird type store. Those people are educated in how to keep varmints from getting your seed and the best feeders for specific birds, and they can really help counsel you on that. So the whole point, or I guess what I'm trying to help you do in this chapter, is to mimic nature in your yard. These native trees and shrubs, and the perennials, the native perennials that we grow as cuts is kind of what started a lot of this, be on this journey. The rudbeckias, the black-eyed Susans, there are so many other black-eyed Susans you can grow around your garden that aren't necessarily, they could be great cut flowers, but you want to grow them because you want to attract birds and native bees. So you just have to kind of do a little homework if you want to dig deeper than what I provide in the book, but the possibilities are endless. And I know we talked a couple of chapters ago about some of the great predators in your garden. Rock piles are a great place for predators. The biggest, one of the greatest predators in our garden are snakes. We have 2 or 3 snakes. I don't see them real often, but we see them, and I see the results of them because they're the ones eating my voles. And a rock pile is essential. And right next to my rock pile is some brush piles. So we have brush piles throughout our native border, and it's really kind of funny. I look at dead limbs in a whole different way now. It's like, ooh, look at that one. That would be a great in a brush pile, because whether it's got a lot of limbs that would kind of hold it up off the ground so things could get under it, or be great to pile stuff on. So, this whole concept of Vegetables Love Flowers in helping you to produce more beauty and bounty by using nature. It's not about, as you know by now, planting this plant next to this plant. It is far bigger and deeper than that. And I just look at my whole garden so very, very differently. It is so much more interesting, so much more fun. And I think it's a much deeper appreciation for what's going on. And I will tell you one more thing I want to highlight out of that chapter are the perches. I went, along with a Rhonda that comes here and helps me from time to time, she and I went and cut down up to a bamboo stand that we found that was in an area that was being overtaken by bamboo. And we cut bamboo stakes, some that are about as big as your thumb or so, cut really tall ones, and then I wove them into my wire fence. You can, whenever you walk the perimeter of our garden, you almost always see either dragonflies or birds, even bees sitting up there. So they really appreciate those perches. And, the bottom line to this whole book is that nature hasn't changed. It's the way that we gardened that we changed through the years. But if you really want to restore the natural order of your garden, you can expect really great things to happen. And I've been doing this for years, and I'm still discovering new ways to implement, and I don't want to say exploit nature, but that's basically it, making the most out of nature in your garden. So I hope you've enjoyed this book study. I've really enjoyed sharing it with you. And if you've enjoyed the book, please, you help an author more than any way other than buying their book by posting reviews of the book on Amazon. You don't have to do a long review, just a few words. That helps Amazon to know which books to show to readers when they go in there to shop. So I really appreciate you being here with me. And hey, till we meet again, visit my website, thegardenersworkshop.com. A lot of fun things going on there. A lot of inspiration and information for gardeners and farmers. And I really appreciate you joining me. Till we meet again. Ciao.